Welcome to the Deep Dive. I know you're here because you want to really understand some fascinating stuff. You don't want to have to read through a ton of material to do it, though, right?
Yep.
And that's exactly what we're going to do. Today's topic, I think you're going to love this.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to dive into Dian Xue Shu. Have you heard of that?
I have.
It's the skill of acting on acupoints. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So to help us navigate this,
Yeah.
we've got two really interesting historical sources that we're going to be looking at.
Okay, so first we have Jinjing Zong.
Mhm.
He wrote Dian Xue Shu, Skill of Acting on Acupoints, back in 1934.
Oh, wow.
Then we have Zhu Xiatian,
Okay.
who wrote Application of Pugilistic Art a few years earlier in 1929.
Okay.
And thankfully, these were brought together in a 2004 issue of Gong Fu E magazine.
Oh, nice.
So we have a really unique window into this practice.
Yeah. Yeah, this is going to be really interesting. We're going to sort of unpack how this martial art works. We're going to look at the basic principles behind it.
Right.
We're going to look at the training involved.
Mm-hmm.
And we're also going to look at some very specific ways that these techniques can be applied in combat.
Yes.
And all of it centers around using very, very focused finger strikes on vital acupoints on the body.
That's right.
Okay, so where should we start?
Well, I think Jing Zong's work is a great place to start
Okay.
because he gives us a structured framework. He outlines 3 distinct levels of mastery. Each of these has its own set of training stages.
Okay.
We're going to focus primarily on the second level.
Yeah.
I think that's where we really get to the core of the physical and mental discipline required for Dian Xue Shu.
Okay. And this second level is broken down into 3 key training stages. The first one, being the 4th stage overall, I guess, is finger hardening.
Yes.
And this, right away, kind of gives you a clue as to how important the fingers are in this.
It really does.
You know, you could use your fist, you could use an elbow, you could use lots of different parts of your body to strike. But the fingers seem very delicate.
They are.
And using them to strike seems like it would require a very specific, very rigorous type of training.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we see.
Okay.
And the text actually mentions prior training
Okay.
from the first level of Jiong Fu, which is essential before you can even begin this finger conditioning.
Oh, wow.
So there needs to be a foundational understanding of martial arts principles in place.
Okay, so you can't just jump into this. You have to have some background.
Exactly.
Okay, and then as far as like how you actually go about hardening your fingers, like what are some of the specific things that they say you should do?
So the sources describe a variety of approaches,
Okay.
and some of these sound legendary.
Yeah, I bet.
They talk about drawing from the 72 Shaolin arts.
Oh, wow.
You've got evocative names like diamond finger, piercing through stones, rubbing palms, and even the skill of slithering snake.
Oh, the skill of slithering snake.
That's right. So that suggests different types of impact, different types of friction, and manipulations to enhance dexterity and control.
So it's a very holistic approach to like really, really getting those fingers in top shape.
Absolutely. And then the text gives us a specific progressive example.
Okay, so like a routine or something.
Right. And this one is pretty straightforward.
Okay.
You would start by gently touching a spruce board
With your fingertip.
with your fingertip.
Yeah.
It could be the middle finger, forefinger, or just the forefinger.
Okay.
And then you would gradually increase the force applied over months.
Over months.
Right. So once you've developed sufficient strength and control, you'd progress to a brick
Wow.
and ultimately to a stone.
So it's very much a long-term type of focus and commitment.
It is.
It makes me think of, you see people doing things like calligraphy, and they're very, very focused on every single stroke. This seems similar.
Very much so.
It's not just the toughness, it's the focus. And it's over years. It's really impressive. And I think that's a great takeaway for anything you're trying to learn. Whether it's a physical skill or a mental skill, that long-term commitment is really what's going to get you to the next level.
Yeah.
Okay, so after a year of this kind of training, what happens then? What's the next step?
Well, the text says that after a year of this training, the finger is considered sufficiently hardened for what they call outer Jiang Fu.
Outer Jiang Fu.
Meaning it's capable of inflicting significant physical damage upon contact.
Wow.
They also point out that achieving inner Jiang Fu, which is Qi Jian Yi, is much more challenging.
So inner Jiang Fu would be affecting someone without physical contact.
That's right.
Okay, that sounds pretty advanced.
Yes, and they actually even include a note about skin damage
Oh, really?
from this rigorous training.
Okay, that makes sense.
And they say that there were Shaolin recipes that existed to help practitioners deal with those issues.
Oh, wow. So they really thought of everything.
Absolutely.
So once your fingers are essentially like, highly trained tools, what's the next stage?
Well, that brings us to the fifth training stage.
Okay.
Blows at points.
Blows at points.
This is where that foundation of physical conditioning is going to be integrated with an understanding of human anatomy.
Oh, okay.
So combining that hardened finger with a deep knowledge of acupoints and energy channels.
So how do you learn all those points? That seems like a lot to memorize.
The method described in the text is ingenious.
I bet.
You would create a life-size dummy,
Okay.
and on this dummy, you would mark all of the key acupoints.
So it's like a three-dimensional anatomical chart.
Exactly. And the main energy channels are actually marked with different colors.
Oh, okay. To like visually show you the pathway?
Right.
That's pretty cool. So what do you do with this dummy?
So you would practice striking,
Okay.
deliberate strikes,
With the finger, I assume.
one or two fingered.
Okay.
Initially, the practice is conducted at close range, about 1 CHI, which is approximately 33.3 centimeters,
Okay.
and in daylight. The primary focus at this stage is accuracy.
Okay, so just making sure you're actually hitting the spots.
Oh, that's right.
That makes sense. And then, obviously, the training progresses, right?
Yes.
It gets harder.
You would eventually progress to practicing in darkness.
Oh, in darkness.
Right.
Okay, so how do you know if you're hitting the target if you can't see it?
So they had a really fascinating technique.
What was it?
You would dip your fingertip in mortar,
Oh.
then strike at the intended acupoint on the dummy. The mortar will leave a white mark.
Oh.
That way you have visual confirmation.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
So even though you can't see, when you go back and look, you can see if you actually hit the spot.
Exactly.
Oh, that's so clever. I love those little, the way they came up with these things back then.
It's amazing.
Without all the modern technology we have today, they were still able to figure out these, really ingenious ways to train.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we've got the water technique. What else is there?
They also describe another method
Okay.
that involves training in a gradually dimming lamplight.
Oh.
So you might start with a brightly lit lamp and then slowly reduce the intensity, maybe by using a shade,
Okay.
and then you continue practicing your strikes.
Okay.
And as the visibility decreases, you're pushing the boundaries of your vision.
Oh, that's a good idea. So it's not just going straight to darkness. It's like a gradual reduction.
Yes.
Okay, now, I imagine that depending on which acupoint you're trying to hit, the amount of force that you use would be different, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Because some of these points are very vital.
Right.
You wouldn't want to hit them as hard.
The text states that less force should be used on vital points to avoid fatalities,
Right.
even in a self-defense situation, which I think speaks to a level of ethical consideration within the art.
Yeah.
Now, conversely, for points that are located deeper within the body, more force might be necessary.
Just to have any effect.
Exactly.
So how would you, is there like a way that you would know which points are the vital points versus the non-vital points?
Well, the dummy, as we mentioned before, would be marked with different colors
Okay.
to distinguish the categories of points.
Okay. Very visual.
Yes.
Okay, so we've got hardened fingers. We're learning to hit the points.
Yeah.
And even when we can't see,
Where?
what's the last component here of this second level of mastery?
So that would be the sixth training stage, eyesight.
Eyesight.
So while good vision is clearly important in any martial art, the development of keen eyesight, particularly the ability to perceive in low light conditions and even complete darkness, takes on a special significance in Dian Xue.
Yeah, because you're trying to hit these very specific points.
That's right.
Especially, if you're in a combat situation, things are moving very fast, it's chaotic.
Absolutely.
We need to be able to see what you're doing.
The text outlines two primary methods for developing what it terms outer Jionu Fu in relation to eyesight.
Okay.
So this refers to the ability to see effectively in darkness. The first method involves mental visualization.
Mental visualization.
So you would sit in a completely dark room, close your eyes, and then try to vividly imagine the location and shape of objects.
Okay.
And after a period of focus, you open your eyes and you see how accurate your image was.
Oh, that's interesting. So you're training your brain to amplify even the smallest signals.
Exactly.
Okay. And then the second method that involves the use of a lamp, right?
Yes, a lamp with a paper shade.
Okay.
And the shade progressively becomes darker. It goes from a light green hue all the way to black.
Oh, okay.
And at the same time, you would decrease the size of the wick.
Oh, to reduce the light.
Yes.
That's
And then you continue practicing distinguishing objects. Yeah.
in the dim light.
Right.
Wow. That's pretty intense.
Yeah.
So those are the methods for developing sight in darkness.
Right.
But then there's also inner G-O-N-F-U for eyesight,
Yes.
which is being able to perceive small details even in complete darkness.
Yes.
That sounds really advanced. I mean, is that even possible?
It's considered a much more advanced practice.
Okay.
And the method described for this is very specific.
Okay.
You would train at dawn.
Okay.
Before sunrise.
Okay.
You face east.
Okay.
Calmly regulate your breathing and focus on the point where the sun will emerge.
Okay.
And they actually give a warning here not to look directly at the sun once it's risen because it could damage your eyesight.
Oh, okay. Good advice.
Yes. Then, after this initial focus, you would close your eyes and perform a series of specific eye movements.
Okay. What kind of eye movement?
So first, moving your eyeballs left and right 72 times.
Wow.
Then there's a pause, and then you would repeat the movement 36 times in each direction. And then this entire exercise is repeated.
Wow. That's very specific. And what's the point of doing that? What does that do?
The text claims that with this level of developed eyesight, combined with well-trained arms and fingers, a 100% hit is achievable.
Wow.
So it really emphasizes that integrated nature of this level of mastery.
Okay. So the fingers, the ability to hit the points, and then the eyesight.
That's right.
It all comes together.
Right.
Wow. And then from there, we move on to the third level of mastery. And that gets even more esoteric, right?
Yes.
You're talking about things like impact from distance where you're not even touching the person.
Right.
And then there's impact through obstacle, which sounds, I don't know, almost like a superpower.
It does.
Were there ever accounts of people actually being able to do that, or is that more just like a theoretical ideal?
I think that's open for interpretation.
Okay, interesting. And then, of course, you have the practice stage where you would apply everything that you've learned.
Exactly. So you start with physical conditioning and progress to something much more refined.
Okay, very interesting. And now we're going to shift gears a little bit, right?
Yes.
We're going to look at Zhu Shidatein's application of pugilistic art, which looks at the practical application of all this.
Yeah.
So Jin Jingzong gave us a great overview of like the structure of the training, the different levels. What does Zhu Shidatein add to that? What's his unique perspective?
So his text actually begins with a warning.
Oh, a warning.
Yeah, he emphasizes the seriousness required when learning these methods.
Okay.
Because even a small error can have significant consequences.
Wow. Okay. And then he gets very specific about which points are important.
He says a total of 32 points are relevant.
32. Okay.
And 30 of these are considered basic points.
Okay.
But interestingly, only 22 of these points, all located above the waist, are commonly utilized.
Okay.
And he includes 14 photographs to illustrate these techniques.
Oh, nice. So you can really see what it looks like. Exactly. And then he goes into detail about specific exercises.
Sure he does, yes.
And each one is focused on a different acupoint.
Right.
Okay. And what's really interesting is that he gives them these poetic names, right?
Oh, he does.
And there are recitations that describe like what happens when you hit that point,
Exactly.
and even potential like treatments.
In some cases, yes.
Okay, let's go through some of those. I want to hear what these sound like. So what's the first one?
Okay, so the first one is called Heihuxue,
Okay.
which translates to sunlight fills the lamp.
Okay.
And this targets the solar plexus,
Okay.
which is point number 12.
Okay.
And the recitation that accompanies this one describes the feeling of severe pain,
Okay.
a significant difficulty in moving,
Wow.
and even feeling as if the skin has been cut.
Oh, wow.
It says that this injury might not be curable for 7 days,
Wow.
and that only an elixir enlivening blood can save the afflicted person.
Okay, so this is a serious strike.
Yes, it is.
Wow. And then the next one, what's that?
So we have Homtang XU.
Okay.
Saint Stripling picks out a pearl.
Saint Stripling picks out a pearl. Okay.
And this one targets point number 4.
Okay.
And this one emphasizes generating force from the waist, timed precisely with the landing of the right foot.
Okay.
And the recitation mentions a piercing force that travels directly to the skull,
Oh.
causing severe pain. And again, a specific medicine is required to treat what they call spoiled blood.
Okay, so another very serious one.
Yes.
And it sounds like a very precise strike to the head.
Yes, it does.
Okay, what's the third one?
So the third one is QI Juan XUE.
Okay.
Steel pike pierces point QI Guan XU.
Steel pike pierces point QI Juan XUE.
And this one targets point number 5.
Okay.
And this involves applying force along the central line of the body using a slanted forefinger.
Okay.
And this recitation details a disruption to the digestive system.
Wow.
And it says that it can even be a threat to life. And it specifies that a medicinal preparation made from 9 different components is needed
Oh, wow.
to restore the person's health.
So these are not to be taken lightly.
You're not.
These are very serious techniques.
Absolutely.
Okay, what's the next one?
So then we have Tanning XUE.
Okay.
Huatuo unlocks the padlock.
Hotuo unlocks the padlock.
And this one targets point number 1.
Okay.
Now, this one's interesting because Huatuo was a renowned physician.
Oh, okay.
And this involves a synchronized downward movement of the arm while simultaneously stepping back into the MABU stance.
Okay.
And the strike is delivered with 2 fingers in an arching motion.
Okay.
And it describes resulting muscle weakness and obstruction of blood flow and even loss of consciousness.
Wow.
With the suggested treatment being an elixir of 8 tastes.
Wow, so this one really shows the connection between, like, the striking techniques and medicine?
Absolutely. It does.
It's really interesting how much they knew back then.
Yes.
Okay, what's the 5th exercise?
So the 5th one is Jian Jiang XUE,
Okay.
making the sea turbulent.
Making the sea turbulent.
And that targets point number 6.
Okay.
And this one utilizes an arched strike with the fingers,
Okay.
while the practitioner is in the DIOMA stance,
DIAOMA.
which is a type of suspended stance.
Okay.
And for this strike, it mentions an unstoppable pain,
Oh, wow.
unless a specific elixir enlivening blood is administered.
Okay, so this is another one where they knew exactly what kind of medicine to use to counteract the effects.
Yes.
That's really interesting. Okay, what's the next one?
The next one is also called Tan Enning XUE.
Okay, same name as the previous one.
But this one translates to Luohan slips on garment,
Luohan slips on garment.
also targeting point number 1.
Okay, same point.
But it's described as an angled blow,
Yeah.
delivered with the forefinger and middle finger while the practitioner is in the GAMA stance.
DNMA stance. Okay.
And the recitation describes widespread pain throughout the body and disruption of both QI and blood flow.
Okay.
So this is a different way to target the same point, but with different results.
Oh, okay. Interesting. So the angle and the stance are really important.
Very important.
Okay, what about number 7?
Okay, number 7 is FEIMIOXUE.
Okay.
Child bows to Buddha,
Okay.
and it targets point number 7.
Okay.
So this one involves a thrusting motion with the forefinger,
Okay.
while the practitioner is in the DIOAM stance again,
Okay.
and it's done immediately after a bowing motion.
Oh, so it's like a deceptive move.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
And the recitation is interesting. It questions the sincerity of ritualistic politeness
Oh, wow.
versus the lack of expected reciprocation.
Okay.
And it mentions a deep and ultimately untreatable pain.
Oh, wow.
So it's this contrast between a polite gesture and a devastating outcome.
Yeah. It's like, don't be fooled by the bow.
Exactly.
Okay, what's the next one?
So we have MI Zong XUE. Okay.
Taking off cloth in front of mirror.
Taking off cloth in front of mirror. Okay.
That targets points number 8 bilaterally.
Okay, so both sides.
Yes.
Okay.
And this involves simultaneous thrusts with the forefingers
Yeah.
on both sides of the body while stepping into a firm stance.
Okay.
And this one details disruption of QI and the function of the 5 centers,
Wow.
affecting both the spirit and the mind.
Oh, wow.
And there's a specific medicine required for treatment.
Okay, so this one sounds like it really throws the whole system off balance.
It does.
Okay, what's the next one?
So we have SUO, XNN, XUE.
Okay.
Old monk carries sutra on his shoulder.
Old monk carries sutra on his shoulder. Okay.
And this targets points number 11 bilaterally.
Okay.
And this one involves a forward thrust with both arms from the MABU stance.
Okay.
And the recitation calls this the lock of the heart,
Lock of the heart. Okay.
which leads to congested arteries
Oh, wow.
and a progressively worsening illness requiring immediate medication. So another one that sounds very dangerous.
Yeah.
Okay, what's next?
We have WSNSUE.
Buju ESUE, okay.
Tiger's claw thrusts into heart.
Oh, wow.
And that targets point number 13.
Okay.
So this one is described as a deep, penetrating blow,
Okay.
using the middle and forefinger in the Dian Ma stance.
Okay.
And it talks about the vital forces of the body becoming frozen,
Oh, wow.
a disruption of blood flow near the heart, and again, the necessity of specific medicine for recovery.
So this is another one that's very serious.
Very serious.
These are some really intense techniques.
They are.
Okay, what's the next one?
So we have ZHUO XUE.
ZHUOMing-XUE.
Okay. Damo holds a sword.
Okay.
And this targets point number 9 on the left side of the body.
Okay.
And this involves an upward arching strike with 4 fingers.
Okay.
And the fingers are held in a half-bent position.
Okay.
And this one mentions a weakening of the body's vital forces.
Okay.
But it is treatable with medicine.
Okay, so that one's a little less dangerous, I guess.
Potentially, yes.
Okay. And what's next?
So we have Diogen XU.
Diogen XU.
Okay. Demo pulls out his sword.
Gummo pulls out a sword. Okay.
This one targets point number 14.
Okay.
And it's described as a forward and upward strike delivered with 2 fingers,
Okay.
while the practitioner is in the GHS stance.
ZEHEH stance, okay.
Which is a kneeling stance.
Okay.
And this one describes dysfunction of the muscles, pain in the throat, and larynx that lasts up to 7 days.
Wow.
And it questions whether a cure for this injury is even available.
Oh, wow.
So it really highlights the potential severity.
Yeah, this one sounds like it could have some long-term consequences.
It does.
Wow, okay, and then the next one.
Xiao Yao Ixu.
Yaoichu.
Yao Yexu. Okay.
Chen Yang thrusts his sword,
Okay.
and that targets bilateral points near the waist.
Okay.
And this involves a straight, strained finger thrust.
And the recitation warns of the inherent danger to these points, describing the potential for fever and a disruption of the body's vital force circulation, though it notes that it is treatable with medicine.
Okay.
So bilateral targeting of points near the waist.
Okay, so affecting the lower body, it sounds like.
Potentially, yes.
Okay, and then we have the final one. What's that?
So the final one is DUGNXUE.
Okay.
Raising sword and splitting pumpkin.
Raising sword and splitting pumpkin. Okay.
This targets point number 15 on the left side.
Okay.
And it's described as an upward strike with 2 fingers while in the Piang Ma stance.
Piang Ma stance. Okay.
Which is a level horse riding stance.
Okay.
And the recitation compares this to a deadly ray
Oh, wow.
that cuts through the organism's integrity
Okay.
and states that there's only one specific means of saving the person.
So that sounds like one of the most dangerous ones.
It does.
Wow. That's a pretty intense list of techniques.
It is.
And then he emphasizes again in the postscript the importance of the stance, right? And just consistent practice.
Yes.
Okay, so to summarize, what we've learned today is that Dian Xue Shu is a very, very, very demanding art to master.
It is.
You know, it requires years of training just to develop the finger strength and the resilience.
Yes, absolutely.
You have to memorize all these points.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be able to hit them even when you can't see them.
Right.
And there's a huge mental component to it as well.
Absolutely.
And it's fascinating how, you know, with Zhu Xiatin, we get these poetic names, these really vivid descriptions of what happens when you hit these points.
It really is.
And even the medicine to use to counteract the effects.
And it really speaks to the level of anatomical knowledge
Yeah.
that they possessed back then.
It's really amazing. And I think what's so cool about this is that it's not just a fighting art.
No.
It's almost like an art form in itself,
Yes.
the way it's described.
Definitely.
The poetry, the imagery. Absolutely.
It's really, really fascinating. So, you know, when you think about all that's involved, you know, the dedication, the anatomical knowledge, the potential consequences